Well, hi, how are you today? I hope that you're having a very blessed day. And today I just wanted to encourage all of you with everything going on. Um, and there are some terrible things happening right now in our country and in this world. And honestly, many think that we have broken the first seal and that we may be looking for the second seal. And we don't know how long, it takes before these seals open, or, we don't know exactly how this is going to work. But we know, right, what's coming. And based on what we're seeing right now, it's not looking good. And so today I want to talk about Daniel. And I want to talk about the fact that Daniel lived in captivity most of his life. And I want to talk too about how did Daniel deal with his oppression, with his evil government, or, in his circumstances. Because he had a pretty difficult time too, but his life is it's an amazing testimony to a man of God, and we can learn so much from it. And I personally, I needed this because I'm struggling with what do I do? How do I deal with this? Because I feel like I need to do something, I don't know what to do. I really just don't know what to do. But anyway, so the book of Daniel was written over 2,000 years ago. And his life is a testimony of how to serve God under difficult circumstances with integrity. And that's what's so important about it. How do we do this, right? And the prophecies in this book are some of the most important, detailed, and reliable prophecies, especially for our time, isn't it? So Daniel, though, no matter what he went through, he never doubted God, even when his circumstances seemed hopeless. He inspires us to this day to live a life of faith and trust in the Lord, and in the fact that our God can do miraculous things. And he really can, because our God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He doesn't change. So his prayer life too, that was an encouragement to read about how faithfully and earnestly, Daniel prayed. He sought the Lord to thank him, to intercede for others, to plead with God. He did it faithfully 3 times a day. So Daniel's faithfulness also shows us how to live in a godless culture without compromise. And this is one of the things we're going to need. So we're going to need strength from the Lord. And we're also going to need to know how to deal with what's happening and what's about to happen, okay? And that's why this is so important. We need to be prepared for what's coming spiritually. So, and Daniel, who better than Daniel? He lived his life in exile, in Babylon. And you find that in Daniel chapter 1. He was taken captive when he was merely 16 to 18 years old. He was a pretty young fella, But he was lucky. He was one of the lucky ones that was chosen for special leadership training. So, he learned their language, he read their literature, and he received an education by them. He even took a new name. And the intention was that he would become part of their culture. Now, you know what I found really interesting, and I wasn't going to include this in this video, but when I was looking at this, the fact that Daniel got a new name. Now, I didn't realize this, but the name that Daniel originally had, the Hebrew name Daniel, meant something very different than the name that he was given in and I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. You know, I would have put it in my notes if I was going to include it. But anyway, it had to do with a pagan god, his new name. So he took a new name that was, you know, that had to do with a pagan god. And I thought about that, and I thought, you know, that's really interesting, because when we, in Revelation, I believe it's chapter 2, we get a new name. The Lord gives us a new name written on a stone. Do you remember that? And then I got to thinking, you know, who else gives us a name? The Antichrist. He gives us his name. I think it's his name or the number of his name in Revelation 13, right? Now, I can't help but think there's something to that. But anyways, I don't want to get onto that right now. And so Daniel really did acclimate in his culture pretty well, except in those areas that were regarded as being sinful. So he refused to compromise his faith, and he remained faithful to God. So no matter what they wanted, he just wouldn't do it if it was sin against the Lord. And the story of Daniel, actually, when you think about the story with him, when they were trying to feed him the king's food, right? And he said no, he wasn't going to eat the king's food. And, you know, this story really, it reveals how Daniel lived in a pagan culture. And yet he still remained holy and separated. Just as kind of we're called today, you know, we're called to be separate. So he not only proved who he was, you know, his integrity and his character, but he also proved who God was by refusing to eat this food. In Daniel 1:8-9, it says, "But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore, he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself." So that's the main thing right there. The main word is that Daniel did not want to defile himself. In other words, he didn't want to sin against the Lord. And the whole reason why he didn't want to sin against the Lord is because it separated him from God. And, you know, when you look at the dietary laws that Daniel was following in Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14, these dietary laws were specifically meant to maintain their holiness, and to separate them from pagan practices. So maintaining a holy, separate lifestyle is what allowed him to have this intimate relationship with a holy God, just like us. You know, the Bible says that sin separates us from God, and we need to be holy, the Bible says, like, because God is holy. And so, you know, Daniel, he found a lot of comfort in God. He found, you know, his relationship with God very important. And that is, you know, the proof of that is in his lifestyle, in his relationship that he had with God, the fact he was so faithful to God, the way that, you know, he wouldn't depart from the Lord. So, you know, I would say that is proof in of itself that he, you know, his relationship with God was so important because of the way he carried himself. But so in verse 9, it tells us that because Daniel would not compromise his faith and defile himself, God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief eunuchs. Daniel's uncompromising response also made a statement to the eunuchs about who he was as a person, that he had integrity, that he was faithful to God. And what's interesting about it is, you know, so many times when we try to take matters into our own hands, like I do this, I'm guilty of this for sure. I feel like I have to fix everything, you know, I want to make things right. And I want to help people. I want to do for people. And, sometimes we can't. We can't fix everything. It's not always up to us. And we have to trust if we do right by the Lord. Okay, we have to trust that God will do the rest. He will do it. He will. So, and that is hard. It's hard to learn to trust him, isn't it? I know it is for me. So I've come a long ways from where I was, but I have so far to go. And God is so faithful, and he is a merciful God, and he is full of grace too. And I thank him for that. But the story too of Daniel in a lion's den, when you look at Daniel chapter 6, it reminds us of the importance of a godly response to persecution by our government or co-workers or anyone really. We need to stand firm in the Lord and trust him to do his thing. So Daniel was a target of jealous co-workers. They knew he was going to be promoted, and this is what it reminded me of, because Darius was planning to make Daniel an administrator over the whole kingdom because of who Daniel was, how good his work was and everything. So the satraps and administrators, they orchestrated this trap for Daniel. They suggested to the king to make a law that if anyone prayed to any god or man besides Darius during the next 30 days, they would be thrown into the lion's den. Okay, so it says in Daniel 6:10, when Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he had done previously. So his response was to pray. Okay, so he was told he couldn't do this. Everyone was told they couldn't do this. But he didn't care. He wasn't going to sin against the Lord. He went and he prayed. He didn't complain. He didn't go down and rile up the masses against the government. He didn't get on, Facebook or whatever, and spout off or call his neighbors. He didn't do any of that stuff. It doesn't even say that he got angry. And that's what's so shocking to me, because I have to say, I'd be pretty ticked off, But he simply did as he had always done. He didn't even change his behavior, right? He didn't hide to pray. He didn't do anything. He just he knelt and he stood steady. He remained faithful and he trusted God. That's all he did. So he didn't need to make a statement. He didn't need to do anything. He knew there would be consequences. He knew what would happen if he didn't follow this law. So, of course, he ended up in the lion's den, right? And Daniel 6:22 tells us what took place. Daniel said, "My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me because I was found blameless before him. And also before you, O king, I have done no harm." So God sent angels to protect him because Daniel was blameless. He had done nothing wrong to the king or nothing wrong before the Lord. And in verse 23, it also tells us because Daniel trusted in his God. See? So, and instead of worrying, instead of trying to figure out what can we do, what should we do, look at the examples of Daniel. Look at the example of Jesus when he stood, when they came to arrest him. That's all that we need to do. We need to be faithful to our God. We need to not sin, okay? And trust that God will deliver us, because he will. He will deliver us. He will protect us. Okay? So, even though Daniel began a captive in a foreign country, He never compromised his faith and devotion to God. Under all of the circumstances, under all the testing and trials he went through, he did not respond in a sinful or ungodly way. He also never stopped trusting in God. He never stopped believing in God. He did not allow the government or their laws to cause him to sin against God, okay? Don't allow them. And it'll happen eventually. They will try to stop us at some point from serving God, from praying, something. They will, just like Daniel. They did to Daniel, okay? But the truth is no matter what happened, Daniel stood without wavering, even in the face of death. When he was in the lion's den, he still stood without wavering. So, you know, and I thought about this. Imagine being Daniel. Imagine writing the book of Daniel. You know, Daniel talked about, he had visions, he had dreams, you know, and he was in, this whole time, he's captive in Babylon. Well, he's having these horrible dreams and visions, you know? And he looks at the empires in Daniel chapter 7, and the four of them. And the last one really, I think, blew him away because it was so different, you know? And the thing about it is even though he saw all this evil, he saw all of it and lived in this evil world that he was living in, he never lost his hope. He never lost his faith. And he never walked away from God. He never doubted God, you know, nothing. He never did any of that stuff. So the one thing it does say in Daniel 7:15, it says, this is how he felt after he saw the final, you know, the kingdoms, the four kingdoms. He says, my spirit within me is anxious, and the visions of my head alarmed me. And that is, you know, that alarms me even. But I think that really, when you look at Daniel 7:9 through 14, okay, at the end of these visions, you know, I think God was trying to encourage Daniel, and I think he was kind of trying to encourage us too. Because this is when he shows Daniel what will happen. When he tells him, you know, that the final beast will be destroyed. And he tells him too, he says, I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. All peoples, all languages. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what color we are. It doesn't matter where we come from. We are all his children. It doesn't matter. So it says that we would all serve him, and his dominion would be an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, in his kingdom, one that shall not be destroyed. See? So Daniel knew the end of all things, and he could hope in that, just as we can today. We can hope in the end of all things and know that our God, his kingdom, will crush that kingdom, that he will deliver us, that he will conquer this man who has killed so many people and will kill so many more. He will kill him. He will take care of it. Because our God is faithful. Our God is just. And he will show up. There is no doubt. And we can hope in that. So I hope that that gave you a little bit of hope today, and encouraged you a little. And you know, if you have any suggestions about anything you'd like me to cover, I'd love to hear from you. Or anything that can help. So opinions are always enjoyed. I love opinions and ideas. So I hope that y'all have a blessed weekend. And I hope that you're safe. And I'll see you next week. God bless you. Bye.